I hadn't planned to spend my weekend at Dr. Evan Harwood's mountain cabin, and I definitely hadn't planned to fall for him. But then again, plans rarely meant much when Evan was involved. It started with a storm, an actual one, not just metaphorical. The clinic had been buzzing all week with news that the roads to West Hollow might flood, and somehow I still agreed when Evan said, "Let's just get out of the city for a bit. You could use the air, Ryan." Maybe it was the way he said my name, too casually for how much it echoed in my chest. Or maybe it was the quiet way he looked at me after patients left, like he saw more than I was ready to admit. Evan was my supervisor at the teaching clinic. He was also, unfortunately, my friend. Confident, thoughtful, and maddeningly unreadable. Evan had this calm that filled a room. Where I was all restless energy and nerves, he was steady. I admired him more than I probably should have. And now, here I was, sitting in the passenger seat of his SUV as we climbed toward his isolated cabin, clouds pressing low and heavy over the trees. "Hope you don't mind roughing it," Evan said with a half smile, his hand steady on the wheel. "No Wi-Fi, spotty reception, and the coffee's terrible." "You had me at terrible coffee," I replied, my voice more even than I felt. He chuckled, and I stole a glance at his profile. His jaw rough with end-of-day stubble, lips quirked. Like he knew I was watching. I looked away too fast, my pulse skipping for no good reason. The cabin came into view just as the first drops began to hit the windshield. It was simple. Wooden, dark-trimmed, with a wraparound porch that groaned beneath our steps. Inside, it smelled like cedar and old books. There were no pictures, just shelves, a fireplace, and a single worn couch that looked like it had stories to tell. "Guest rooms down the hall," Evan said, tossing me a spare blanket. "Unless you're scared of creaky floorboards, in which case, couch is yours," I smiled. "I'll take my chances." He lingered for a second, then nodded and turned away. And I stood there a moment longer, holding the blanket, trying to pretend I hadn't noticed how close his shoulder brushed mine, or how the air between us felt tight with something unspoken. Something was shifting. I felt it in the way he looked at me, less like a mentor, more like a man quietly watching, weighing something. Maybe it was just the storm in the air. Or maybe, finally, he was starting to see me. Evan and I had known each other for a little over a year. I started as a nervous final-year med student, shadowing him at the community clinic downtown. He was already well-respected, Dr. Harwood to most, Evan to a very select few, and I was, just trying not to trip over my own nerves during patient consults. He'd been kind from the start, not overly warm, but gentle in the way that mattered. He didn't belittle mistakes. He asked questions that made me think. And somewhere between the early mornings, shared lunches at his desk, and the long hours in exam rooms, something subtle had started to form, an easy rhythm, a quiet connection that didn't need to be named. "You always chew your pen when you're thinking," he said once, during a late night of charting. "You always pretend not to notice," I'd shot back, and he'd smiled, really smiled, the kind that lit up his tired face and made my stomach twist. It was those moments that stuck with me. Like the way he always handed me his coat when I forgot mine, even when it meant he got rained on. Or the way he remembered I liked my coffee with a ridiculous amount of milk, even though he teased me about it every time. Now, up in the cabin, it was quieter. Just the two of us, and the sound of steady rain against the roof. It made everything feel sharper somehow, more intimate. I unpacked slowly in the guest room, running my fingers along the bookshelf tucked in the corner. Medical journals, sure, but also dog-eared paperbacks, a few travel guides, and one old photo of him and a younger guy who looked like him, both laughing in a canoe. I wondered if it was his brother. I wondered why it made something small ache in my chest. Evan knocked lightly on the door frame. "Hey, slight problem. I forgot the second sleeping bag." I turned. "You mean like totally forgot? Or left it on purpose for plausible deniability?" He raised an eyebrow. "You think I'm plotting to freeze you to death on a mountain? Wouldn't put it past you. We grinned at each other. It felt easy, like the 100 other times we'd bantered like this, but also different. There was something in the way he leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me. Something thoughtful, something quiet. Well, he said, we can either take the bed and awkwardly pretend we're not invading each other's space, or one of us can have the couch and wake up with back pain. I blinked. You're suggesting we share a bed? He shrugged, casual. It's king-sized. We're both adults. I nodded, a little too quickly. Right, adults, sharing beds, totally normal. He smirked. You're overthinking it, Ryan. I smiled, but I couldn't quite meet his eyes. That night, after dinner and a movie on his laptop, some old thriller he loved and quoted from memory, we got ready for bed in a rhythm that was almost domestic. He offered me the left side like, it was obvious I'd take it, and when we lay down, I kept to my edge, stiff as a board, trying not to breathe too loud. Relax, he murmured in the dark. I don't bite. Would be less suspicious if you didn't say that in the most suspicious way possible, I muttered back. He laughed quietly, voice warm. Fair enough. There was a silence between us then, not awkward, just charged. His hand was close to mine, resting above the covers. I thought about reaching for it. I didn't. But I also didn't sleep for a long time. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, feeling his steady breathing beside me, wondering if he was really asleep, or if maybe, just maybe, he was lying there thinking about me too. I woke to thunder splitting the sky. At first, I thought I'd dreamt it, but then came the unmistakable patter of heavy rain drumming against the cabin roof, no longer the gentle rhythm from the night before. This was a storm. The kind that made trees groan and roads disappear. Evan's side of the bed was empty. I sat up, heart skittering, and found him in the kitchen, standing by the window in gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt, his hair slightly mussed. He was holding a mug with both hands like he needed the warmth, watching the trees sway with a strange, still look on his face. You're up early, I said softly, rubbing my arms. It was colder today, and the air felt heavy. He didn't turn around. Roads flooded. I blinked. Flooded? He finally glanced at me. The bridge we crossed on the way up, it's underwater. Checked the weather alert. We're not going anywhere for at least a day, maybe more. I should have panicked. I should have been annoyed or restless, but I wasn't. Not really. Some part of me, a part I didn't want to examine too closely, was relieved. Guess we're stuck, I murmured, stepping beside him. Guess so, he echoed. But there was something unreadable in his voice. The cabin felt smaller now. Not in a claustrophobic way, but in that way when everything is just a little too close. The silence between us stretched as I made coffee, aware of him behind me, of the way he leaned against the counter and watched me like he was trying to figure out what to say. After breakfast, we tried to keep busy, played cards, watched the storm. But the power flickered just before noon and cut out entirely by 2. With nothing left to distract us, we ended up on the couch, a shared blanket draped across our legs, our knees brushing every time one of us shifted. We'd spent nights together before, late shifts at the clinic, drives home after conferences. But this was different, more intimate, more dangerous. Evan's foot tapped against mine absent-mindedly as he read, and I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just habit, that it wasn't on purpose. But then he glanced up, eyes catching mine like he'd been waiting for me to look. What? I asked, too quickly. He smiled faintly. You get that crease between your eyebrows when you're deep in thought. Like you're trying to solve a puzzle no one else sees. I swallowed. Maybe I am. He didn't look away. What kind of puzzle? You, us, this constant maddening tension. Doesn't matter, I said instead, shifting slightly. our legs touching from knee to thigh. Neither of us moved away. The rain deepened outside, soft thunder rolling in the distance. I could feel his warmth beside me, could smell the clean soap on his skin. My heart wouldn't settle. Every nerve in my body was tuned to him, to this moment. "Ryan," he said quietly. I turned to him, and I swear, for a second, something flickered across his face. Like he wanted to say more. Like he was standing on the same emotional edge I was. But then he blinked and stood up abruptly. "I should get more firewood before it gets dark." I stared after him as the door shut. The room felt colder without him in it. That night, the power was still out. We lit candles, the flickering glow casting golden shadows across the wood-paneled walls. The fire crackled in the hearth, but it didn't help the weight sitting in my chest. We were both quiet, sharing the bed again, the silence louder than any words. "You okay?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, rougher in the dark. I hesitated. "Yeah, just weird being stuck here, I guess. You don't have to lie to me." I turned onto my side to face him, surprised to find he was already looking at me. His eyes were soft in the dim light, but intense. "I'm not lying," I said. He reached up, brushing a piece of hair from my forehead, an unconscious gesture. Maybe, but it made my breath catch. His fingers lingered a second too long, and then they were gone, and I was left staring at him like a fool, every part of me screaming to say something, do something, but all I could manage was, "Thanks." Evan's expression shifted, something unreadable dancing behind his eyes. "You always pull back when you're scared," he murmured. "What?" He shook his head. "Nothing." "No," I said, heart thudding. "Say it." He exhaled slowly. I see how you look at me, Ryan. And I'm not blind. I just didn't want to make assumptions or cross a line." I froze. The air between us was electric now. "You haven't," I whispered. He didn't move. "But I could?" My breath hitched. "I don't know what happens after. I don't want to ruin anything." He nodded, and for a moment I thought he'd let it go. But then he leaned closer, so close his forehead nearly touched mine. "Don't think this us is something that can be ruined," he said. "Not if it's real." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But all I could do was stare at him, caught in the quiet space between fear and want, wondering if he could feel how badly I was trembling inside. Wondering if this was finally the moment where everything changed. The storm had passed by morning, but the silence hadn't. The world outside looked rinsed clean, the trees heavy with dew, sky stretched wide and pale. But inside the cabin, something lingered. An aftershock, almost. Evan hadn't brought up what he said last night. And I hadn't brought up how close his face had been to mine, how he hadn't touched me but might as well have. We moved around each other like ghosts. Soft steps, avoided glances, conversations trimmed down to essentials. Hated it. By late afternoon, the sun filtered through the windows in patches, warm against the wood floor. I sat cross-legged in the corner near the fire, not reading, not doing anything, just picking at the frayed hem of my hoodie. Evan was across the room, stacking dishes we didn't need to clean right away. Every movement was precise, controlled. Unlike him. It was unbearable. "Are we going to pretend last night didn't happen?" I asked quietly. He stilled, his back to me. The silence stretched, then he turned around, resting both palms flat on the counter like he needed grounding. I wasn't pretending. I swallowed hard. "Then why won't you look at me?" His jaw clenched, and he exhaled slowly. "Because I don't know what you want me to see." That cracked something in me. What if I don't know either? Finally, his eyes met mine, and in them, I saw fear, but not rejection. Not anger, something closer to what I felt. He crossed the room slowly, carefully, as if each step might trigger something in me. When he sat down across from me, his knees brushing mine, I didn't pull away. "Ryan," he said, my name quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I've been trying not to mess this up. You know that, right?" I nodded, my throat tightening. "I've been trying not to feel anything at all." A faint, humorless laugh left him. "Yeah, same." My fingers twisted the fabric in my lap. "When did it start for you?" He hesitated, then looked down at his hands. "The first time you stayed late at the clinic. You fell asleep on the couch and your head tilted into my shoulder. You drooled on my shirt." My face burned. "Seriously?" "It wasn't the drool," he said, smiling a little. "It was the fact that I didn't want to move, that I sat there for an hour, listening to you breathe and thinking I could get used to this." I stared at him. My heart thudded so loud I was sure he could hear it. "I told myself it didn't mean anything," he continued, "that we were just close friends, that I was reading into it. But then it kept happening. The little things. The way you'd laugh at my stupid jokes. The way your eyes lit up when you talked about your patients. The way I started noticing your absence like it hurt." I wanted to say something, anything, but I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. He reached out slowly, brushing his fingers against mine. "I didn't want to say anything because I thought maybe you didn't feel the same. Or maybe you did, and you'd panic. And I couldn't risk losing what we had." My voice was barely a whisper. "So you waited." "Yeah." I closed my eyes for a second. "I kept waiting too, for it to pass, for you to look at me and not make my stomach twist." A silence fell between us, but it wasn't the same kind of silence. This one was full, charged. "I'm tired of waiting," I said, and I didn't mean for it to come out like that. So raw, so open, but I didn't take it back. Evan moved closer, his hand sliding fully over mine, anchoring me. "So stop." I looked at him, really looked at him. His expression was so open, so vulnerable. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, slow and steady. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "I don't know what happens after this moment." "That's okay." His voice was calm, like always. "We don't have to know everything. We just have to know we want it." "I do," I said before I could overthink it. "I want you." He blinked, just once, and then he smiled. Not a big smile, something small and aching. "I want you too." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, and then I laughed, a little shaky, a little stunned. "God, this has been killing me." "I know," he said softly. "Me too." We sat there, neither of us sure what came next, but the space between us was gone. His knee pressed against mine, his hand still over mine. Then, slowly, like he was afraid I might vanish, Evan leaned in, my breath caught, his eyes searched mine, giving me time, space to pull away. But I didn't. And then his lips brushed mine. It was barely a kiss, just the softest pressure, a question more than an answer. But I leaned in, pressing back, and the second kiss came deeper, warmer, full of everything we'd never said. His hand cupped my jaw, thumb grazing my cheek, anchoring me to the moment as I melted into it, heart pounding, stomach twisting, skin buzzing. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't perfect. It was better, because it was real, earned, honest. When we finally pulled apart, my forehead rested against his, breath mingling. "I've thought about this so many times," I murmured, eyes still closed. "And now I don't even know what to say." He smiled against my mouth. "Then don't say anything. Just stay." "I can do that." His fingers slid behind my neck, pulling me close again, And I let myself fall, just a little, into the warmth of him. Into the possibility of everything this could become. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, golden and soft against the damp earth. Inside, we stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in something new, but not unfamiliar. Something that had been waiting quietly to bloom. It was strange how the world looked exactly the same, yet everything felt different. The fire still crackled softly, the walls still creaked with the settling wood, and outside the same trees swayed gently in the breeze. But Evan's hand was in mine, our knees still touching, and there was this lightness in my chest that hadn't been there in, maybe ever. We hadn't moved much since the kiss. Neither of us seemed to want to break the moment. Our foreheads still touched. Our breaths still close. He smelled like pine and soap and something distinctly him. And I wasn't overthinking it for once. I was just letting myself feel. "I keep expecting you to bolt," he murmured after a while, his thumb tracing lazy circles over my knuckles. "Like you'll realize this was all a mistake." "I'd have to let go of your hand first," I said, smiling against the side of his neck. "And I'm not planning on doing that." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Good, because I'm kind of into this whole affectionate you thing. Who knew you were such a softie?" "I am not a softie," I said, leaning back just enough to glare at him. Evan tilted his head, pretending to study me. You did almost cry when we watched that Pixar short about the dumpling." "That dumpling was her child, Evan," he grinned. "Exactly my point." I smacked his arm and he laughed, catching my wrist midair and tugging me back toward him. The movement made us shift, closer this time, until I was half curled into his chest, my cheek resting where I could hear his heart beating steady and sure. It was oddly easy. No awkward fumbling, no panic. Just us. But lighter now, unburdened for a moment. I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythm of him. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly, surprising even myself. Evan's arms tightened around me. Of what? Of messing this up. Of wanting too much. Of how it'll change everything. He was quiet for a beat. Then, "Ryan, you've already changed everything, just by being you." I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. "I don't know how to do this," I said. "I've never been with someone who actually mattered." He pulled back just enough to look at me, brushing a thumb over my cheek. "We'll figure it out. Together," I nodded, heart thudding. "I'll probably overthink everything," I warned. "I already do," he said with a small smirk. "We'll be a perfect disaster." I laughed, and he kissed the sound off my lips. It was slower this time, deeper. His hand on the back of my neck, mine curled in the fabric of his hoodie. No rush, no hesitation, just the warmth of him, grounding me. When we broke apart, breathless, and slightly dazed, he let his forehead rest against mine again. "So, what now?" I asked, voice low. He shrugged lightly. "We survive another night in this drafty cabin, try not to die from hypothermia, and then go back to the real world, and see if we can still make each other laugh when there's no storm forcing us into close quarters. And if we can't, I'll just lure you back to another cabin," I smiled. "You have a plan for everything, don't you?" "Only when it comes to you," he said softly. We fell into a comfortable quiet then, limbs tangled, hearts slowed. There was no urgency, no pressure to define everything right away, just the quiet miracle of being. I pressed my face into his shoulder. "We're going to be a mess." "Yeah," he said, kissing the top of my head. "But a beautiful one." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. We had no promises yet, no perfect plan. Just a confession, a few kisses, and the unspoken agreement to keep trying. But for now, that was enough, more than enough. By morning, the storm had passed. I woke to sunlight slipping in through the cracked blinds, painting gold across Evan's bare shoulder, where the blanket had slid down during the night. He was still asleep, face soft in that rare, unguarded way I'd only ever seen a few times before, on long drives during post-midnight movies, and once, years ago, when we'd crashed on the same couch after a college party. But now, waking up beside him didn't feel accidental. It felt like something we could build on. I didn't want to move. Not just because his hand was still curled around mine beneath the blanket, but because this was the first time I'd woken up feeling settled. Not confused, not scared, just quietly, stupidly happy. His eyes opened slowly, a lazy smile tugging at his lips. "Morning," he murmured, voice gravelly with sleep. "Hey." He squeezed my hand and blinked at the ceiling for a moment. "Wasn't a dream, right?" "Nope." I smiled. "Sorry. You really did kiss your emotionally repressed friend in a storm cabin." He gave me a crooked grin. "You're not that repressed." I raised a brow. "Okay, emotionally constipated maybe. But you've got potential." I laughed, shifting to prop myself up on one elbow. "That's your romantic morning after line?" "Really?" He shrugged. "You already like me, so I don't need to be smooth." Debatable. He sat up then, the blanket sliding lower as he reached for the flannel shirt he'd discarded last night. I watched the way his shoulder blades moved under his skin and caught myself smiling like a fool. As he pulled the shirt on, he looked over at me. "So, what happens when we get back? The real world, our jobs, our lives. The fact that I was, technically still his doctor, though in an unofficial, small-town kind of way that made everything blurry." I reached over and touched his knee. "We take it slow," I said. "We talk. We figure it out. You make fun of me every time I hesitate." His face softened. "And you let me kiss you when you start spiraling." I nodded. "Exactly." A pause. Then, "I want to try," he said. "Not just see where it goes. Try, Ryan." My heart did this quiet, clumsy flip in my chest. I took his hand again, the same way I had last night, fingers locking like they'd been waiting to. Me too. Outside, the snow had begun to melt in slow drips from the rooftop, the trees glistening in the early light. Everything felt fresh, like a blank page. Or maybe not blank, maybe just waiting for the next chapter. We packed in silence, the easy kind, occasionally bumping into each other on purpose. He stole my beanie halfway through and refused to give it back, so I retaliated by tossing his sock out the door into the snow. He wrestled me for it, laughing the whole time. His eyes lit up in that way they never were when we were just friends, like something had finally clicked open inside him. It had inside me, too. On our way out, I paused at the edge of the porch. He stopped beside me, holding the door open with his shoulder, his breath visible in the cold air. "What?" he asked, when he saw me looking at the cabin one last time. "I think I'm going to remember this place forever." He bumped his arm against mine. "You're such a sap." "You kissed me here," I said, nudging him back. "That's significant. Want me to do it again?" I looked at him, the sun catching the curve of his grin, and felt that same warm flutter low in my chest. "Yeah," I said, voice quiet. So he did. And when we walked away, snow crunching beneath our boots, our hands found each other again without hesitation. No more pretending, no more wondering, just us, starting something. Real. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was the perfect beginning.